This is When Gen X Ruled the Multiplex, where I tackle the films that were in some way important to those of us who were born somewhere in the general range of 1965 to 1980. In 1989, Tim Burton's Batman, from a script by Sam Hamm and Warren Scarron from a story idea by Hamm, was a game changer for Hollywood blockbusters. At the time, Burton was known for quirky films like 1985's Pee-wee's Big Adventure and 1988's Beetlejuice, but Batman, which was based on the long-standing DC Comics character, moved him into a bigger realm. Prior to Batman, the 80s were a bleak time for comic book film adaptations. The Superman franchise, which starred Christopher Reeve, got off to a strong start with Superman in 1978 and Superman 2 in 1980, but by the middle of the decade it had descended into underwhelming sequels and spin-offs. And that was pretty typical. Comic book films in the 80s weren't viewed as a good financial prospect by studios, and the ones that did get made were often either deliberately campy or just plain bad. For decades, I was a Howard the Duck defender, and then I watched it recently for the first time since the 80s, and I immediately realized that, nope, everyone else in the world was right. I am wrong. This film really sucks. Released in the summer of 1989, Batman earned $400 million in box office off of a $48 million budget, and it opened the door for the kind of big event superhero films that are now vital moneymakers for the studios. In Dark and Dangerous Gotham City, a married couple and their young son are robbed at gunpoint by a pair of hoodlums in an alley. Afterward, the hoodlums divide up their loot and discuss rumors of a man dressed like a giant bat who's been going after Gotham's criminals. As they're talking, a man dressed like a giant bat sneaks up behind them and beats them up. He tells one of the hoodlums his name is Batman, and he orders him to tell all his fellow hoodlums about him. At a celebratory dinner, Gotham's district attorney Harvey Dent tells the well-heeled crowd about plans for Gotham's upcoming 200th anniversary gala. Harvey Dent is played by the impossibly smooth and charming Billy D. Williams, Lando Calrissian in the Star Wars films, who is always a damn delight to see. Harvey Dent, of course, is a notorious character in the Batman universe, as he's destined to become the supervillain Two-Face, but that will not happen to Billy D. Williams' version of Dent. A ruthless killer named Jack Napier watches the televised press conference while nuzzling with his secret girlfriend Alicia, who is the mistress of his boss, notorious crime lord Carl Grissom. Jack is played by three-time Oscar winner Jack Nicholson. Alicia is played by model Jerry Hall, known for her long relationship with and marriage to Mick Jagger, though she's currently married to conservative media mogul Rupert Murdoch. Corrupt Gotham Police Lieutenant Eckhart, played by William Hootkins, who was rebel fighter pilot Red 6 in Star Wars, is peppered with questions about Batman by Gotham Globe reporter Allie Knox, played by Robert Wool, star of the HBO series Arliss. After brushing off Knox, Eckhart meets with Jack and accepts a bribe from Grissom. Jack is constantly protected by his loyal henchman Bob, who is played by Jack Nicholson's close friend Tracy Walter, whom we also saw in Repo Man. In the Gotham Globe newsroom, Knox is visited by prize-winning photojournalist Vicky Vale, who wants to work with him on his story about Batman. Vicky is played by Kim Basinger, who rose to fame in 1986 for her steamy performance in 9.5 Weeks, and who would go on to win an Oscar for LA Confidential. Mob boss Carl Grissom meets with Jack. Grissom is played by the wonderful Jack Palance, well known for playing villains in films like Shane and Sudden Fear. Grissom orders Jack to break into the Axis Chemicals plant. It's obviously a setup. Grissom has found out that Jack is sleeping with Alicia, and he's trying to get Jack killed. Vicky and Knox attend a black tie fundraiser at Wayne Manor, home of reclusive Gotham billionaire Bruce Wayne. Circulating at the party is Bruce Wayne himself, though he's not recognized by many of the guests, Vicky and Knox included. Bruce, and of course his alter ego Batman, is played by Michael Keaton, then best known for big comedic performances in films like Mr. Mom, Gung Ho, and Beetlejuice. Also at the gala is Bruce Wayne's hyper-competent butler Alfred Pennyworth, played by Hammer horror films star Michael Gough. Gough would also play Alfred in Tim Burton's 1992 Batman Returns, as well as in the pair of Batman films directed by Joel Schumacher, 1995's Batman Forever and 1997's Batman and Robin. Knox tries to pummel Harvey Dent and Gotham PD Commissioner Gordon with questions about Batman, but gets nowhere. Commissioner Gordon is played by Pat Hingle, who, like Michael Gough, played that character in all four of the Burton-Schumacher Batman films. Commissioner Gordon is summoned away from the gala to deal with Jack's raid on Axis Chemicals. Knox and Vicky try to trail Gordon, but somehow end up in a room filled with antique armor and weapons. They wander around and make fun of their host for being wealthy and worthless, not realizing that Bruce Wayne himself is trailing right behind them. Bruce introduces himself, and he turns out to be very friendly, but distracted and a little strange. At Axis Chemicals, Lieutenant Eckhart, working on behalf of Grissom, orders his officers to kill Jack on sight. Jack kills Eckhart, and then Batman arrives and fights Jack, who falls to his presumed death into a vat of toxic chemicals. Vicky dines with Bruce at Wayne Manor, and they end up going to bed together. Jack, who has survived his ordeal in the tank of chemicals, visits a sketchy plastic surgeon who tries his best to fix his acid-destroyed face. Jack visits Grissom, who is shocked and dismayed to realize he's still alive. When Jack steps out of the shadows, we see he now looks like the traditional comic book Joker. Green hair, unearthly white skin, and wide red lips plastered in a permanent grin. Jack kills Grissom and cheerily greets a horrified Alicia, who promptly faints at the sight of him. Jack, now known as the Joker, covers his face with makeup to look more like his former self and meets with Gotham's rival mob bosses. He announces that he'll be taking over all of Grissom's territory. When one of the mobsters objects, the Joker fries him to death with a hand buzzer. Later, the Joker murders the remaining crime bosses in front of an assembled crowd in downtown Gotham. During the carnage, everyone ducks for cover except for Bruce, who remains standing out in the open in what seems like a fugue state, staring at the Joker. We can assume he identifies the Joker as a nightmarish kindred spirit to his own creation, Batman. During a live report on the mysterious deaths of two models who died with their faces frozen in Joker-like rictus grins, a news anchor is overcome with uncontrolled laughter. She collapses on the floor and dies with her own face frozen in a similar grin. The Joker takes over the airwaves and announces that he has poisoned an unknown assortment of common beauty and hygiene products such as toothpaste and hairspray, which leads to the death of a number of Gothamites. Vicky gets a message to meet Bruce for lunch at a restaurant in an art museum. There's no sign of Bruce, but the maitre d' delivers her a mysterious package containing a gas mask with a crayon-scrawled message instructing her to put it on. Poisonous gas fills the museum and either incapacitates or kills everyone inside. The Joker arrives, and he and his henchmen set about defacing art. The Joker introduces himself to Vicky and proclaims his love for her. He shows her Alicia, who appears to have gone quite mad and whose mask-covered face is scarred by acid by the Joker. The Joker announces his intention to turn Vicky into a similar work of art, and he sprays acid from his boutonniere at her face. Vicky ducks and throws a glass of water in his face to drive him away. The Joker pretends the acid is melting his face, a la the Wicked Witch of the West, and Vicky rushes to comfort him. We've got to talk about Vicky. For the first half of the film, she's mostly okay. She's got a good rapport with Knox, especially when she's first introduced in the newsroom as a daring photojournalist known for her graphic and up-close photos from dangerous war zones. From this point on, however, she is a ridiculous mess of a character who could not possibly have survived in a dangerous war zone because she'd be too busy screaming and fainting, both of which Vicky does quite a bit in this film. Basinger is doing what she can with the role, but Vicky Vale is bizarrely written on multiple occasions, starting with this moment right here in which she tries to comfort the deranged mass murderer who just tried to burn her face off with acid. Batman crashes through the roof of the museum and whisks Vicky off to safety. The Batmobile, which looks suitably sleek and high-powered, is parked outside, and they jump in and take off. The Joker and his goons are in hot pursuit in crappy old cars, and clearly the Batmobile can outrace and outmaneuver them. But for some reason, Batman decides to leave the Batmobile behind, and he and Vicky take off on foot, presumably to make their lives more interesting. He tries to use a retractable grappling hook to hoist himself and Vicky to the safety of a high catwalk, but Vicky lies about her weight, so he can't lift them both, and he ends up dropping to the ground. Batman fights off some goons, then takes Vicky back to the Batcave and gives her his research on the toxic chemicals the Joker's been using to poison Gothamites. The next day, Bruce stops by Vicky's luxurious apartment. As he tries to work up the nerve to tell her he's Batman, the Joker bursts in. Bruce uses a metal vanity tray as an improvised bulletproof vest and confronts the Joker in a very direct and fearless manner, and we see that even when he's not wearing the bat suit, he is every bit as unpredictable and crazy as the Joker. This is a cool scene. It is my favorite scene in the entire film, though it's damaged a bit by Vicky, who is literally standing around munching popcorn while her unarmed boyfriend goes up against a gun-toting psychopath. Oh, Vicky. The Joker asks Bruce, "You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?" This enigmatic query throws Bruce off his game, and while he's distracted, the Joker shoots him in the gut and leaves. Left alone, Vicky sees that Bruce has mysteriously disappeared. The Joker once again takes over the airwaves to announce that he's going to throw a big parade and hand out free money for Gotham's bicentennial. While watching the Joker's broadcast, Bruce flashes back to the murders of his parents, who were killed in front of him by a mugger when he was a child. After shooting Thomas and Martha Wayne, the gunman asks young Bruce, "You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?" In the present, Bruce realizes the killer was in fact the Joker. This is a significant departure from comic book lore in which the Waynes were killed by a petty criminal entirely unrelated to the Joker. For the purposes of this film, however, I think it makes a certain amount of narrative sense to link Bruce's formative tragedy to his present-day nemesis, so I don't have a problem with this change. What I do have a problem with is this next scene, in which Bruce is jolted out of his flashback by Alfred, who has decided to bring Vicky Vale into the Batcave to show her that Bruce is Batman. I don't know why Alfred does this. Obviously, that particular bombshell should be solely Bruce's to detonate. Bruce and Vicky talk about how they don't know if they can make a relationship work given Bruce's unconventional lifestyle, but they're willing to try. In downtown Gotham, the Joker has his parade, complete with floats and giant creepy helium balloons. He throws money at the assembled crowd, who snatch it up eagerly, unconcerned that this is the guy who recently tried to murder them all through their beauty products. Knox and Vicky arrive at the parade and notice that the balloons are leaking poisonous gas, because the Joker is, of course, planning on murdering everyone. Knox yells at Vicky to get in the car, and then he grabs a baseball bat and jumps into the fray to try to stop the Joker from killing everyone. It'd be great if Vicky took a similarly proactive stance, but I'm not asking for miracles. I'm just asking for her not to make the situation worse by doing what she actually does, which is start up the car and drive off in a panic. As the area fills with poison gas, Knox flings himself on the hood, clearly expecting her to stop and pick him up. Instead, she screams and speeds up, then slams on the brakes with enough force to fling him off the car into a pile of trash, where he lies in a bloody and lifeless heap. We won't see Knox again until the closing moments, and I swear, when I first saw this film in theaters in 1989, I spent the remaining half hour half convinced that Vicky had just killed Knox and left his dead body in an alley. Batman arrives in the Batjet. He seizes all the poison balloons and releases them into the heavens, then takes a moment to pose stylishly in front of the full moon. The Joker shoots the Batjet right out of the sky using a revolver with a very long muzzle. I don't really know guns, but I'm thinking that shouldn't be possible. The Batjet crashes on the steps of a cathedral. Vicky runs up to the flaming wreckage to see if Batman's okay and gets nabbed by the Joker. He drags her up to the bell tower at the top of the cathedral with Batman close behind. The Joker dances around with a traumatized Vicky while Batman punches out his henchman before going up against him. The Joker gets the upper hand, and Vicky and Batman end up dangling by their fingertips hundreds of feet above Gotham. The Joker's henchmen swoop in with a helicopter to pick up their boss, and Batman manages to anchor the Joker to a stone gargoyle, which drags him down to his death. It ends with Vicky and Knox attending a press conference at which Commissioner Gordon demonstrates the brand new Bat Signal, which can be used to summon Batman whenever Gotham needs him. This is a great-looking film. Anton Furst won an Oscar for his art direction, which really set the standard for what we now all think Gotham City should look like, i.e. a crazed and menacing Art Deco fantasia. Furst took inspiration from the design of Terry Gilliam's Brazil, which I looked at several weeks ago, in which everything is a blend of the old and the new in a mishmash of architectural styles. The character of Batman was created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger in 1939, and the design of Burton's Gotham City is grounded in the look and feel of the 1940s. That's a perfect choice because Batman also has strong film noir elements, and the noir genre had its heyday in the 1940s with classics like The Maltese Falcon and Double Indemnity and The Big Sleep. In particular, the clothes and hairstyles of Batman deliberately evoke that noir aesthetic. Oingo Boingo frontman Danny Elfman, a frequent collaborator of Burton's, wrote the score, which is both dramatic and quirky. The soundtrack was provided by Prince, who contributed an album's worth of songs for the film. That soundtrack was #1 on the Billboard charts for 6 weeks in 1989 and went double platinum. It was hugely popular at the time, though Burton reportedly didn't think the music was a good match for his vision. He was forced into the partnership with Prince by Warner Brothers. Burton has a point. In some ways, Prince's songs, which are very aggressively of the moment for 1989, clash with the film's retro look and feel, but I think that friction between the look and the sound of Batman works well to keep viewers off balance. The theatrical release of Batman was preceded by a phenomenon known as Batmania. The film was relentlessly hyped, and everybody wanted to see it. There had been big summer blockbusters before Batman, starting with Jaws in 1975 and encompassing the Star Wars trilogy and the Indiana Jones films and E.T., among many others. But Batman was so big and so successful that it created a new template for the film studios. You take an existing intellectual property that people feel kindly towards, you don't worry so much about the casting, you hype it in advance, and you sit back and you watch the money pour in. Michael Keaton makes a great Batman. There have been many, and he's probably my favorite. But he was an unconventional pick due to his comedy background and his lack of experience with action films, And there was significant fan backlash to the announcement of his casting. It didn't matter. Everyone went to see this film anyway, regardless of who was wearing the cowl. After he retired from the role following 1992's Batman Returns, his cowl was picked up and discarded by a steady procession of actors. Like Keaton, those actors, some of whom were extremely famous, didn't matter as much as the existing intellectual property. Batmania was built up around Batman, not around Michael Keaton, just as in the films to come, the hype would surround that character and not specifically Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Christian Bale, or Ben Affleck. Robert Pattinson is already a huge movie star with a devoted fan base, but whenever Matt Reeves' Batman film gets released, the hype around it will surround Batman, not Pattinson, because that's the way blockbusters work now. They're not vehicles for a movie star, they're showcases for an existing intellectual property. In many cases, this strategy of raiding existing intellectual properties and relying on their built-in audiences has resulted in some pretty half-assed summer movies. No matter how much you loved your Transformers toys and cartoon as a Gen X kid in the 80s, you've got to admit, we've had too many Transformers films, but Tim Burton's Batman was wildly successful because it's a well-crafted and innovative film on its own terms. It's also based on an especially appealing intellectual property. Batman was created over 80 years ago, and the entire greater Batman universe continues to be a source of reliably good entertainment through comic books, films, television shows, animated series, and more. I say this as a 46-year-old lady wearing a Nightwing t-shirt while sitting in front of a bookcase full of Batman-related graphic novels. If any character is going to change the course of summer blockbusters, Batman's a pretty good pick. Next time, zombies have taken over Los Angeles, and it's up to a pair of machine gun-toting teen girls to stop them in the 1984 cult classic Night of the Comet. Thank you for hanging in there with me today, and I will see you then.